What is happening, you guys? Welcome back to the Let's Go Win podcast. You're in for a treat today. This gentleman, I was on his podcast. He is insightful, he's bright, he's funny, and he's super cool. Kevin Kepple is a leadership coach and host of Unlock Your Freedom podcast. He loves to be outside in nature. He's an Ironman athlete and has the most fun when he is helping business owners and executives find their joy by becoming the heroes of their own lives. Kevin, what's up, brother? How you doing?
Hey, what's going on, JM? Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here with you.
I'm excited to have you. So, normally I would start right into how did you become leadership coach, yada, yada. But I don't talk to all that many Ironman athletes. You guys are a little cuckoo, a little crazy, a little amazing, quite a bit amazing, actually. How'd you get into that, man? That's some sled, man. That's some work.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. Every time it seems a little harder too. But I've met my wife, 13 years ago. We actually July 3rd was like the anniversary when we met and celebrated that a little bit. And I met her, and my whole life I've been an athlete. Played a lot of team sports though, baseball, football, hockey. And I never really ran unless it was like first base or, the 20-yard line or whatever. And that was about it. And my wife was into running, and she still is. And she was like this phenomenal runner. And I'm like, yeah, I'm an athlete. Like, I'll go run with you. And that day we were running on treadmills, and like she kept speeding it up and speeding it up. And I'm like, dude, how fast is she going to go? And like, it's like maybe a quarter of a mile in. And I'm like, dude, I think my chest is about to explode maybe. And I couldn't even run a whole mile. And it was, I don't like not being good at things. And I went to, I think it was like Run On, one of the running stores. I'm like, hey, I need some shoes maybe. And they're like, you're not running in those, are you? I'm like, no, of course I'm not running in these, not anymore. And I just really, really focused on getting better at running. I don't know how much growth there's been, but at the end of that first year, I ran a half marathon, and then I ran the Dallas Marathon the next year, I think, and did the New York Marathon. And I really like doing hard things because it proves to me I can do hard things, and running is always hard for me. And like every time I win a race, I'm just thinking about, finish, like, what's it going to be like when I'm not doing this anymore? And, one of my friends who got into it with me, he's like, dude, how do you go so fast out there? And like, he's faster than me now, in all fairness. And I don't know that I ever went that fast just compared to him when he was standing still maybe. But I was like, man, he goes, what are you thinking about out there? I was like, dude, honestly, I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat when I get finished, because you know what? I love to eat, and I really love to be on the bike or run or swim because it gives me a lot of time to think without the noise. And I just really think that that's important, that metacognition when we're thinking about our thinking. And it's really helped me understand with a lot more clarity what is and what isn't important. And it's always very humbling too, to just put your body through things that it's maybe not specifically designed to do.
Yeah, there's so much mindset work that we can talk about whenever I do talk to athletes that do these extreme races, because look, you can't the whole elephant in one bite would be kind of the analogy. You're talking about a significant race, and I'm glad to have you share so everybody's real clear on what an Ironman is. Talk to me about these, how you do. So you're thinking about what I'm going to eat. I mean, brother, we're talking you're running a full marathon after doing some crazy amount of biking and a pretty significant swim. So it can't just all be about whatever your food is, although I'm curious what you eat afterwards. But how do you break that down, man? That's a lot of time to have that thoughts.
Yeah, it sure is. And, like, I'd love to say that every time I ever raced, I had a, bulletproof mindset, and that's just not the case. I've actually talked myself out of, pretty good performance probably sometimes. And I think like the thing that serves me the absolute best is, like this is hard. I'm like, dude, I can do hard things. Like I probably said that to myself a million times. And, the other thing that I really focus on doing is just continually surrendering to the present moment, just letting go. Because if I think about, oh my gosh, I got to run 26 miles after I get off this 110-mile bike, or, after I swim, I've got to go ride and then run. Or if I get, a lot of times there's like maybe stomach issues or whatever, because your heart rate's so elevated and you're, eating stuff or not, and you get dehydrated. And it's like, man, like I'd feel terrible. And if I think about feeling terrible, then I feel more terrible. And just really letting go of needing, myself to be a certain way to be okay, or, whatever. I was doing an Ironman in Cozumel one time, and I've never been in wind like that in my life. There was a headwind and a crosswind from both sides on the bike. I couldn't believe it. Like, and it's right there on the beach, and the ocean was just crazy wind, but there's no tailwinds. The only place there wasn't a wind. And I kept getting sick, and I don't know what I was doing wrong with something. With my nutrition plan was off, and I this like they had this one spot where you could stop and get your bag and like get some food out of it. And I was like, I have Pepto Bismol tabs in my bag, and I was like so excited. And like I looked in there, they weren't in there. I couldn't believe it. I looked in my bag like 18 times. I'm like, no, I know they're in here. And this girl's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm sure I didn't look okay. And she's like, here, try this. And she gave me a Snickers. And I'm like, trying anything at this point to feel better. And I rode another 2 miles, and I was like, oh my gosh, here comes the Snickers again. And so I'm laying like out over this like brick wall, and this really nice ambulance driver, she's looking at me as I'm throwing up into the wind, and it's blowing back in my face. And she's like, no mas. And I'm like, un momento. And, just I think the ability to laugh at myself, right? Not needing to, I'm not a professional triathlete. Like I get passed by women all the time and men that are way older than me, like that's awesome. And I love that they're so fast. And I'm like, my wife beats me on the run, and she's 5'2" and I'm 6'2". I feel like I should be faster than her, but it's not about that. It's just about like, did I show up, as the best version of me, that I could? And if not, why not? And, what can I do in the future to do better?
Well, I like what you said right when the negative thought comes, which is this is really hard. Or as you're getting your ass kicked by the wind, you're like, this sucks. But what I heard is I can do hard things. It sounds like almost a mantra that you've created where it's like, I do hard things. I can do hard things. And it's like, it's so brilliantly profound because it's an exact opposite of how your body's feeling. And that's the power of our mind, right? Is like, look, extremely creative but also very destructive. We talked about that on your show. Did you learn that from someone, or are you just like, you when negative or tough things come up, you're just like, I'm gonna exact opposite reaction?
Yeah, I'm sure I saw it something similar in a book somewhere. Like you, I love to read like voraciously because, why wouldn't I consult the most brilliant minds in a condensed form? And, probably made it my own in some way. But I know the way I got there in the end was really getting clear on, why I was doing what I was doing. Like, okay, like, why are you doing this hard thing? Like, well, for one, to prove to myself that I can do hard things. And like, that's what I want. Cool, man. Like, okay, you know what? What's the ultimate goal? To prove to myself I can do hard things? Like, cool, I can do hard things because you know what? I usually get what I'm looking for. And, however you want to say it, what you focus on, you create more of. What you focus on expands. And, it's so important that we, tell ourselves the story of the life we want to live as opposed to, what we don't want.
Yeah, I hope everybody, again, what you focus on expands. So true. So let's talk about this, brother. You're a leadership coach, and we're talking some transformational leadership stuff that you do. Is it as simple as getting this mindset, like what I focus on, that, or what is the tenets of this leadership that you really employ when you're working with people?
Sure. That's a great question. And it is super simple, but simple doesn't always mean easy, right? And I think Leonardo da Vinci has this great quote: simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And I love that because if you can't explain something simply, then you don't understand it yourself. And it's like I couldn't explain to you, pi, the mathematical, equation. I don't even think it's an equation, but whatever it is, 3.24, and it never ends. Like that's the extent of my knowledge, right? But I'm not a mathematician. I don't need to explain that to anybody. And it hadn't been solved for a reason, and that's okay. And so what we really do is, keeping it really simple because it, people often like, tell me the approach. And I'm like, well, the approach is you, right? Like, because if I teach you how to win my way, you're not living my life. It's gonna be hard for you. But we kind of go through 4 pillars or principles, if you will. And it starts with connection, like connected to, the truth of us through like our heart set, like what do I truly, feel inspired to do? Why am I here? And how can I be connected to that part of me? And the way that you get there is through the mindset, right? Like I got to have that operating, effectively and efficiently first and foremost before I can get to the heart. And once we get, really connected to the, our ultimate power, right? The truth of us, it's about clarity, like what do you want and why do you want it? Those two really simple, innocuous questions on the surface, right? But I mean, if you ask 9 out of 10 people, you're going to get a lot of words as the response that really don't tell you anything, or you're going to get that blank look like, what in the world are you talking about? But maybe a different word in the middle there, and if you don't know what you want, it makes it hard to really know if you ever get it or which way to go to get it. And so, what do you want and why? And we were talking about the book you suggested, Man's Search for Meaning. And it's like, what do you want and why? There's not a how in there, right? And it's like, if you knew how, you'd already be doing it. And, when you get clear on that what and the why, and, leave the how up to God, because the why, the how will emerge when your why is clear enough. And then we really work to, help the people that come to us maximize their creativity, their unique expression of genius, because that's, what we're all about, right? When we're creating, we're striving for uniqueness. But if I'm competing with you, I'm striving for sameness in some fashion. And, like, I'll never be able to win your way, not exactly your way, not at the level you can do it. And like, you'll find yourself doing things you don't want to do if you're trying to win, the way other people win. I got in that trap with my brother a lot when I was younger, because he's super talented in so many different areas that I'm not. He's very patient, very methodical. I'm like, I think better when I'm moving about 90 miles an hour, and that makes his head almost explode. But we're just different, right? We win different ways. And lastly, it's flow. Like, how do we create these peak states on demand? Whether it's me one-on-one with another person, me alone, or me in a group. And there's different degrees of flow for sure. But and that book Flow by Csikszentmihalyi, right? He talked about the happiest people on earth have the most flow in their lives. And so I want more access to happiness and aliveness. And we get that from flow, but we also get dramatically heightened levels of productivity. I'm sure that, in an hour or two of work, you can probably do a lot more than, an hour or two of work output wise. And, like, that's productive, right? And that's the goal, not busy.
No, for sure, that's the goal, and reaching that state is awesome. It. There's just no better feeling, I don't think, because there's not much work that's happening. I mean, there's a ton of work happening, but
Yeah.
it feel like work. What are some ways to find that, brother? Because I got it: connection, clarity, creativity, but man, flow. I
Yeah.
am obsessed with this idea. I'm so glad you pronounce his name because I always chop it up. Uh,
That's why I didn't say his first name.
um, but I really am curious on the ability to find flow. What are some tangible tips to the audience where you're like, hey, look, if you're really trying to get to this state, this optimal state that a human being can operate in, how do we do it, brother? What are some thoughts that you have around finding that?
Sure. Like, the two things that have to be present for flow, like, you have to have like some fairly high degree of skill at whatever it is you're doing, but there also has to be a very high degree of challenge. And there's like kind of a sweet spot you're looking for where it's not too challenging to where it's overwhelming. And it's not like so easy for you that you don't even care. And so that, like, has to be there. That's the prerequisite, right? And like these are flow triggers. And some of the other flow triggers, like, clear goals. You have to know, like, what do I want out of this experience? Whether you're playing hockey or watching a sunset with your significant other or by yourself or whatever. And novelty has to be there. Like, you were talking about curiosity on my podcast, and that's like the number one step in intrinsic motivators, according to Daniel Pink, right? Is being curious. That's why kids are such phenomenal learners. They're always looking to close the gap, right? They're like, what if, right? They're in that sense of wonder. And so, a really good flow trigger, curiosity. There has to be some risk involved too, and some sort of complexity and unpredictability and surprise. And there also has to be some form of immediate feedback. And so one of the easy, like, flow examples I always think of is in hockey. And like, pretty quickly, like, whether you're doing well or not in hockey, if they take the puck from you or whatever, like, okay, that's your feedback. Like, and you're probably out of flow pretty quickly or whatever. And like, that, what gets most people in trouble and knocks them out of flow is when they start looking at other people aside from what they're doing. They take themselves out of the present moment and think about what they just did or what they're about to do. And the cool thing you get from flow is you get hypofrontality, which is where the inner critic shuts off, right? That, one who wants all the attention for no work, and, that tells you, you're not good enough or whatever. That's just not true.
Yeah, I love that you said challenge because so often people want it to be easy. I'm like, no, you don't. If you perfect any game, it will become boring. You won't want to do it anymore. one of the things that continuously comes up that you've said is staying present, being in the present moment. It's clearly something that has shaped who you are, what you do, the way you show up. What are some things that you do to stay in that present moment? Because again, I'm trying to put myself in that. Okay, I just got done with the swim. I'm going to go back to the triathlon because it again, I'll never do it, but I'm going to try and mentally do it. The swim, I got that part. I grew up a swimmer, no problem. The bike, it's going to suck. My butt's going to hurt a little bit, but the run, after all of that, how do I stay in the present moment, brother? That is remarkable. I'm thinking about how hard it was, what I want to go eat. How do I stay in that present moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways that you could probably do this, but this is obviously a work in progress for me as well. But obviously, the goal is to surrender to that sweet spot of the present moment, where I'm living in that more vertical space than the linear space. Because even if I think, I got to run another mile, like that's hard. I can't run a mile in an instant, but you know what? I can take one more step, and then one more step, and just the way that I really bring like a hyper focus on the present is to really use the five senses that we have. It's like, okay, and I'll just ask myself, I'll go through them like, what do I see? Okay. What do I hear? What do I feel? What do I taste? And on and on. And that helps me really pay attention to the immediate environment. And that always brings me back into the present moment. And then I'll like shift to some inner body awareness. And so I can feel like, pain in my body. And, pain doesn't have to be a bad thing. And that's okay. I'm using, my body in extreme ways. And I'll start at my feet. And I like usually start on my left foot because I'm left-handed, I suppose. That's why I do that. And I just picture like it lighting on fire, and then I do that all the way up my, like all my muscles, up my calves, up the front of my shins, up my legs. And so that I'm done, like I'm on fire, like somebody in a movie in my head. And then I blow it out and it's like this cool blue, just hot steel in my head. That's the picture. And even if I'm running, half a mile an hour, I feel like I can walk faster than I'm running. I still come out of that feeling way more powerful. And that usually takes quite a bit of time too to go through that. And, it gives me something to do as opposed to think about how hard this is, or, like who's passing me or whatever, stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah, a gal I had on just the other day was talking. These visuals continue to come up when I talk to people about this idea of whether you're going to change your feeling, yeah, which is what you did, right? You said hot, on fire, and then you blew it all out, a cool blue, I think you said. And her thing was energetically, she would shower or do a waterfall and have the energy come off of her. What is the significance or importance of actually seeing this take place? Even though we're creating it in our mind, why is that so significant? Because this continues to come up and I love it and I'm practicing these things. But why is that so impactful? And does it actually change the way your body feels?
Yeah, man, it sure does for me. And every like feeling we have in our body, the thought is the ancestor of that feeling. And so if I'm running down the road, I'm like, this sucks, this is hard, I'm not a good runner, blah blah blah, like it's going to be really hard, I'm going to feel like I've got a weight pack on. And like it's so cool though, like how reactive our body is to our mind. And that's kinesiology, right? The body thinks with the mind. And it's not that I'm fooling myself. I'm not sitting there like I can run a 3-minute mile. I don't think anybody can do that. And I don't think I could run a 6-minute mile if I wanted to. But I just think it's really important to focus on the things that you do want, because the body's going to generally react accordingly. And so it's really crucial that you're like, am I looking for what I want or what I don't want? And I think I kind of said that earlier. But it's curiosity, right? And that's like that full intrinsic motivational stack that Daniel Pink or Stephen Kotler talks about really well. And that's really kind of the pathway to flows, right? We start with curiosity, and then the passion, and then followed by purpose, and then autonomy and mastery. And when you kind of stack all of those things, you get such a good chemical cascade that is like there to push you forward. And it's made so we evolve as humans, right? But it works in running or whatever, like, because if I have all of those things together, like I'm naturally hardwired to perform at my highest level. And that's really kind of the pragmatic approach to flow, if you will.
Yeah, I like how simple you make things because you say focus on what you want and you ask why, right? And this continues to come up. You're like, what do I want? Why do I want it? Not how, but what and why, and focus on what I want. You mentioned earlier your genius, and there's a topic I wanted to get into, which is owning your genius. What does that mean, brother? And how does one go about owning their own genius? Because I've heard people working in their zone of genius. Uh, I when you say that word, sometimes that'll bring up thoughts of people, good, bad, and different. But what does that mean when it says owning your genius? What's that all about?
Yeah, the way that I'm using that word is kind of like, what does the art of you look like when you've, mastered the craft of you? And that's really beautiful when you do that, because the prerequisite to that is, giving yourself permission to be you, to stand out, to be unique. And we were all, created in these very special, unique ways. And like, there's going to be some rhyming with creativity, but there's never a copy. And, like for the longest time, I would try to copy other people's version of success. And then I would fall short because I'm not other people. And I found myself doing things I didn't want to do, quite frankly. Like my brother loves to fish, and I almost fell asleep saying the word fishing. It's just not exciting to me. And I would go out there and try to fish, and I'd tangle my line like instantly. And I was like, my subconscious is like, dude, we don't want to do this. Like, let's try to find a way out of this. And so owning our genius is about, understanding, yeah, what are my special talents, right? Because talent's not rare. Everybody in this world's talented. One of the assessments that I love to use with the people that I work with is strength finders. And it's, just identifies your natural talents. And there's only 34 that Gallup uses on that assessment. And I've seen thousands of reports at this time, and I've never seen a blank one, right? There's always 34, just a different order. But what's rare is people who can understand these talents and have developed them into strengths and can use them on demand, because this is our natural sources of power, our natural sources of energy. And, energy and power is pretty indifferent, right? It just goes the way I direct it. It's like gravity, right? It keeps me from floating away to the moon or whatever. But if, we go up to my roof and jump off, it's also going to smash us into the ground because it's powerful. And so I need to really understand, hey, what does it look like when my power is serving me? What does it look like when it's sabotaging me? And so we use, strength finders, of course, because, like I'm left-handed, right? It's my natural talent, but I haven't developed that talent since, a little kid, right? Because that's not a strength I'm looking to employ. But when I really understand, the strengths that I do have, now how I can use those on demand, and, my unique expression of creativity. And we also, focus on a few attributes too, especially in the leadership space, but just also how to, be a better version of you, how to be a better human. And, how do we mix all that together and into the art of you? And it's not like a destination, right? Like, oh, I've arrived. It's a continual evolvement to, what does better look like? And, some days better is incremental, but some days it's, a quantum leap. But as long as we're moving forwards, right, we're not regressing or, decaying even, right? Really dangerous word there. So just really understanding, what makes you you and how you can use that at the highest level.
Yeah, so I guess the easy follow up, but it's I just have to ask it because we've had this argument for years: is do you focus on the strengths, avoid the weakness? Uh, do you recognize those weaknesses and try and improve? I.e., your example of I'm not a great runner out of the gate, but dang it, I'm going to get better, and now I'm running a triathlete. But it didn't mean that you weren't a great runner; it just means you didn't spend time in that. So the basic question is, do we truly focus on our strengths, brother, and outsource, or just this is the weakness, is what it is? Or is there a level of figure out, hey, this is a weakness and I'm gonna make it a strength? What have you found most beneficial for people in leadership roles? What do you coach on typically there?
Man, it's such a great question. And I'm sure you've been asked that 100 times, if not more. And I know I sure have. That's one of the first questions, especially when we bring out strength finders. It's like, okay, well, how do I raise up these lower ones? Like, all right, well, I think there's kind of two sides to the same coin on the answer. Like we only have 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, right? No matter how amazing we are, that's the same amount of time for everyone. And, if there's certain things that I can do that give me elite performance, that express my genius, well, I want to spend as much time as I can there, because when I'm using those strengths and those gifts, like that's naturally going to be very energetically uplifting for me. I'm going to get way better results, and I'm going to inspire and empower the people around me to, go be the best version of them too, because we're all models for somebody. And if I'm spending a lot of time doing the things that I'm not naturally designed to do, like that's when I find myself kind of living somebody else's life. And I don't know about you, but there's a ton of resistance on, the things I need to do the most and the things I need to do the least, right? and I'll like put it off. Like when I'm working on like the back end on my website, I'll like, how many times can I spin in my chair before my feet touches the floor? That's what I'll do instead, right? Like, because I don't like doing it, and it becomes this big like bear in my closet that I don't want to let out. And like, man, why don't I just pay somebody else who's that's their genius and they actually love doing it? And so, yeah, I need to understand my weaknesses so that I can, empower other people to help me with those blind spots that I may have. But also, like, understand your weaknesses is great because you get the contrast. Okay, cool. Like, I'm not perfect. Get a lot of humility from looking at the things I'm not good at. It doesn't mean I can't do those things, but I'm very talented and skilled and have a lot of strength in these other areas. And this is how I'm going to really serve at the highest level. So this is really where I want to spend my time, because this is where I'm going to find the most access to that happiness and aliveness. And I think, man, when you see people working on purpose, using their genius like that, it's so inspiring. Like, I don't have to know the people doing that, right? Like just reading the book, like listening to your podcast, the past couple of weeks, because I knew we were getting together and like, man, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, like very clearly and super inspiring. I'm like, man, that's cool. It's like proof of concept, right? Like when we live in our genius, we feel really good and we get to help other people. And so it's, pretty cool deal, right?
Well, and this is me giving everyone permission. Look, I've grappled with this forever and I probably will continue. When you suck at something, it's never great to be like, yeah, I suck at it. No one likes to say it, but like technology for me, look, I do believe in a growth mindset. However, when you're talking energetically and energy, it takes so much energy for me to go work on something tech wise versus talking about what we're talking about doing a podcast, and vice versa. I know people that are techie talking on in public or even doing something like this. I had guests that are freaking out. I'm like, it's just you and I talking. There happens to be a video camera and whatnot. But the point is, like, I'm giving you guys permission. Once you find what you like, what you're good at, you will feel that spike in energy. When you're constantly focusing on things you're not good at, it wears you the heck out. So I love the way you put that, brother. And I think that's a great, uh, just giving people permission. It's okay. It's okay. Um, so working with, you mentioned the strength finders and Gallup. One of the things Gallup did a study, and I don't recall exactly when, but they found 71% of employees are currently disengaged in the workforce. 71. So 10 people walk by, maybe 3 people are engaged and joyful in their job. Brother, that's awful if that is true. And truly, I look, they did the study. I'm sure that there's a lot of reasoning behind what they found. How in the world do we help people find more joy in what they're doing, brother? Because I don't like that stat. I don't like the study, but it's impactful, and I see it with companies all the time.
Yeah, I've seen that stat from Gallup as well, and man, it hurt my heart. And then it brought up memories of me being one of those 70%. And that's a hard way to live, man. It's like Sunday night, you stay up late because you don't want to go to sleep because you got to get up and go do that thing you don't want to do with the people maybe you don't want to be with. And you're definitely not contributing. And like when I was in that place, I didn't want to admit it, right? I didn't have the capacity to be that aware at that juncture in my 20s. And so instead I just suppressed all these negative feelings that I had, and it became this very chaotic, angry energy, and like it's going to get out somehow. And I was very destructive mostly with myself, fortunately, but it was so hard. And really the way I got out of it was learning to say I don't know and mean it. And it was so that took me 30 years to learn how to say that and mean it. But then I was able to ask for help. Like, hey, I don't have it all figured out. Like I'm 30 years old. I'm like a grown man, quote unquote. I feel like I should have it all figured out, right? And my coach at the time was awesome. He's like, dude, he's like, we're all trying to figure it out, man. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, dude, you probably feel like there's some sort of a mix up and you're not even supposed to be here. I'm like, yeah, exactly. He's like, yeah, we all feel that way pretty much, man, at some point. But you know what? Like, it really helped me understand that everything's messy in the middle. And my life is always in the middle. And so it's going to look a little messy. I don't like go outside when I'm halfway done getting dressed, with a sock on and some shorts and like, whatever. I'm like, I look like a failure. I look crazy, right? Because everything's messy in the middle, and including us. And so we're all a work in progress and just having grace for ourselves and think that's really crucial.
Yeah, brother, you just said one of my favorite words. I don't know how much I used it pre-pandemic, but post-pandemic, I used the word grace often for myself and for me interacting with others to give and allow grace. How does that show up in your life, brother? Because again, pre-pandemic, I don't know how much I used it, but I I grew more empathetic over the last couple of years, or at least I'm trying to be. Where did that come from for you, brother? The word grace, because I love it. I think it's important. I'm just curious how you found it and how it's shown up in your life.
Sure, that's such a great question, and I feel like it's definitely become a lot stronger over the past couple of years for me too, because grace is such a cool gift to give to yourself and to the world. And I used to be really hard on myself, and like I can't give what I don't have. If I'm not graceful with myself, I'm not going to be graceful with the people in my life, obviously. And when you were on my podcast, you were talking about your gratitude practice, and I'm very intentional about gratitude as well. And I found myself thinking about all the people I was really grateful for that had given me, 18, 19, 20 chances or whatever. I'm like, man, they're so graceful with me. And God's been graceful with me. And, just like the fact that I'm still alive and I've almost inadvertently off myself, on accident multiple times. And, by the grace of God, I'm still here. And it's like, cool, man. Like grace is so crucial. And one of the ways that I really am intentional about being graceful is whether it's looking inwardly or looking at others is to focus on the performance and not the personal, right? Like if I'm playing baseball and I go up and I strike out and my coach is like, dude, you're the worst baseball player I've ever seen in my life. Like what's wrong with you? How did you get your shoes on? Like I feel terrible, right? And you just lowered motivation dramatically because you told me what I'm doing wrong. You made it personal and you didn't tell me what I was doing right. But if I come back and you're like, hey, hold your hands a little bit higher next time you swing and keep your eyes open, you'll have a lot better success. I'm like, okay, cool. I can do that. And that doesn't, make me feel bad. She doesn't attack me personally. So I think just, separating the performance from the personal is one of the best things you can do to, practice grace.
Guys, you're hearing from a leadership coach, and this is one of the biggest leadership lessons I had to learn. No one, in my opinion, is trying to fail or suck at their job. So, what Kevin just said is so vitally important. Focus on the performance, not the personal. We don't know so often if somebody's dealing with a sick child at home, sick mom, that maybe their health is failing, maybe they have some awful thing. You just don't know. Brother, how do you get more leaders to follow that advice? Because I know early I was the opposite, man. I was just like, you suck at your job, boom. And I would just hit them. And I took almost pride. I hate to say it. I almost took pride in having the tough conversations, but it wasn't having tough conversations. It was just kind of being a dick, honestly.
I know that style.
It's like it's just such an ego at play there. How do you get more leaders to understand that? Focus on the performance, not the person. I love that. I'm going to absolutely use that. But how do we teach that?
Sure. And you use that great word earlier. You're like, I've been working on my empathy a lot. Just not just seeing what other people are seeing, because so often we put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. We just look at the world in their shoes as us. And that doesn't really connect us in the most powerful way. I need to, be able to feel what they're feeling without owning their feelings. And that's some powerful stuff when you can do that. And it's a skill that it can absolutely be developed. But I think the simplest way that you can keep that in front of you is, another great word that you used on my podcast was kind. And like, if I'm really intentional about being kind as opposed to right, like really good things usually happen, because I've never walked away from a conversation with like, man, they were right about everything. They were awesome. And they made me, wrong about everything. That felt so good. But I have walked away from a lot of conversations like, man, they're very kind. Like, JM, you're a successful guy, man. You got a brilliant brand. You've, sold multiple companies, like, but you're really kind and like a lot of humility with that, man. And that's really, that's an endearing trait in a leader, man, because if you're kind, that means you have grace, right? And it also, answers those great questions. You were talking about John Maxwell earlier. And it's like, do you like me? Can I trust you? Can you help me get what I want? Those three questions that we're asking the leader. Like when you're being kind, like I feel like you're checking those boxes pretty well. And, man, every time you're right, somebody else has to be wrong. And kindness, it's maybe it's underrated, I don't know. I used to think it was weakness, but you know what? Like if I'm being kind and you think I'm weak, okay, that's cool, man. You know what? To take it a step further, I don't have to have an opinion about everything. I don't have to have an opinion about your opinions. I don't have to have an opinion about myself, right? Okay, cool, man. I'm just gonna surrender to the sweet spot of the present moment and just be a human because that's what I want, right? A human being to connect with.
Yeah, one of the things I wrote about was I would rather be wrong and win than right and lose. And I'm telling you right now in our country, brother, and not to get political, but I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. People are trying to be right and we're losing rather than be wrong. Let's win. Who gives a shit? I don't care. I'll be wrong today. Let's win. I don't care. You have an awesome podcast, Unlock Your Freedom. So I get to ask this question back to you because I told you it's my favorite F word. And it's, what does freedom mean to you, brother? Because I talk about going from fear to freedom. I'm curious what freedom means to you.
Man, I've asked that question so many times, and you're the first one to turn it around on me. And I've thought about it a lot. I'm like, I better have a decent answer for that when it comes to me. And I think freedom is the ability to wake up with happiness and aliveness and serve people the way that you want to serve. So making the impact you want to make.
I love it. It's simple, it's concise. And aren't we all trying to be happy? We all just want to be happy. So I love what you said there. You had also asked me, and one of the most impactful books that you've ever read on your show. And I told you I'd love to read as well. So I'd love to know maybe your top 1 to 3 books that have really impacted your life.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on your first answer was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I've recommended that probably more than any other book. And I know that's fairly well recommended on like Tim Ferriss's podcast. I think it was the #1 recommended book. And like, I just think it's such a great book. It's so humbling. But in addition to that, I love Stephen Pressfield. And this is like pick a favorite kid, right? There's so many books out there I love, but I love The War of Art specifically. It's super short. I probably read it 10 or 15 times. I've listened to it probably as many times on Audible. And it's just a brilliant expression of how to get over the resistance in your life. Whatever that invisible force is that's stopping you, like first off, to identify it, which I had no idea when I first read. I'm like, the whole time I was reading the first, like, what is resistance? Like, what is he talking about? But it's that thing that tells me not to go play on the highway when it's rush hour traffic and run around, right? Because I'll die. But it's also that thing that tells me not to start a new business because it's scary and it's unknown. And so I think it's really just a brilliant, brilliant expression of getting over, the stuff that's stopping you.
I read that one about 3 or 4 years ago, and I know it'll hit me differently this go around. So I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna dust that one off because it got me, but it wasn't as profound. So if you're telling me, I'm going back into it, man. I'm excited.
Well, he's got another one. He's got a bunch of really good books. There's another one he has got called The Artist's Journey, and it's basically he parallels it to the hero's journey, which is really, really interesting because it talks about we're always in different journeys, and it could be in a day or a month or a lifetime, and very, very powerful.
He's pretty smart dude for sure. This is just the open forum. Is what should I ask you that I just didn't know enough to ask? I mean, you have so much insight, you help so many people, you have this cool way about you. I told you guys, man, he's the coolest kid on the block. I love the way you enunciate words and you're just so calm. But what do you want to share with the audience? I didn't know enough to ask you.
Yeah, man, you ask great questions. You're super present, you create a great environment, make it really safe, and it's super easy. One thing I guess we could talk about is something I like to call the influence equation. And you also mentioned this earlier. It's like leadership is influence, according to John Maxwell. And John Maxwell's written 100+ books, I think, now on leadership. Just amazingly prolific writer and expert. But the influence equation is pretty simple, and I used to execute it backwards, like many new leaders do, and some seasons still do. And it's really kind of 3 things: it's trust, connection, vision. But if I start with vision and people what to do, people aren't connected to it. And if they don't trust me, then they don't really care to co-create my vision with me. And they might when I'm around, but as soon as I go away or there's a problem, like production's going to stop and people start rowing in all different directions. And you come back and you're like, what happened? And it's beautiful though, like your book, Let's Go In. You start with vulnerability. And that's trust, man. Like if I can, be vulnerable and create trust through authenticity and vulnerability and all those beautiful things, like that's really cool because when you trust me, that means you feel safe. And if you feel safe, that means you'll go into the unknown and start being creative. That's really, really good because that's your magic. And then like, if I feel connected to you, right, that's really good, but I can't give what I don't have. So I myself have to be connected. And it's really beautiful. When you have a connection built on trust, that's when people will co-create your vision. And it's so beautiful because you have to have people growing as individuals and growing together as a team if you want to create any kind of championship performance, whether it's, little league or a, Fortune 500 company. And when you're, growing as individuals and growing as a team and co-creating a vision, that's when you co-elevate together. And, three people become way more powerful than three people because of the synergy you're going to develop. And so I think that it's so crucial that we understand and execute the influence equation with ourselves first, and then with the people around us.
So I want everybody to after this episode, I want you to think of the leaders that you look up to. And I want you to go through and look at what Kevin just talked about. I want you to also imagine those leaders that you've seen that are not that good. And I saw one bright as day when you said they go in opposite, right? All about vision, but never had the trust or connection. I'm telling you, you will watch those leaders topple again and again. What he said, that influence equation is so powerful. And if you're doing it backwards, that's okay. You can fix it. But I think that's so important. Brother, I mean, again, you and I could chat so long. This already had 2 hours with you today. It's awesome. But where can people connect with you? They want to know more about what you're doing, whether it's, I know you have a potential mastermind. I don't know if that's for everybody, but I know you're doing some cool stuff. So where can people connect with you?
Yeah, you can just go to Instagram, Kevin Kepple, and send me a DM. I love to connect with new people, and maybe I can point you in the right direction. KevinKepple.us is our site too, if you want to check it out. And yeah, we love new friends, so say hi.
Well, check him out, you guys. Again, he's as cool as the other side of the pillow, man. He's a good dude. I'm really happy and grateful you're on the show. I appreciate you and the way you show up, man. And it was wonderful. I had a great time.
Man, it's my pleasure. Thank you. I'm really grateful to get to be around with a powerful leader like you. I think you're a little bit higher up the mountain than me, so that's cool. Make my path that much more seamless. So fun to follow.
Look, this is a good inner circle to have. I'm appreciative and grateful. So I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did. Look, there is tangible, basic, and I mean basic in the best possible, simple terms that he put, and they're so impactful. So go back. I want you to definitely go check out Kevin. And until next time, you guys, remember, your mindset matters. We'll talk to you then. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to letsgowinpodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.